For last year's words belong to last year's language, and next year's words await another voice. And to make an end is to make a beginning.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all humankind. Your hosts, in Britain, America, and Germany. Matthew, Marissa, Rob, Bob, John, and Martin.
Do. Oh yeah, baby. T.S. Eliot. Right. This is a special end of year episode, and I'm joined by several Spodcats. Well, 5 of them, in fact. So I will get them to introduce themselves, starting with the American in the top left-hand screen of my Zoom.
John Bennick, Texas.
John Bennick from Texas.
Rob Annable from Wolverhampton.
Ah, what a classic Midland town.
Keeping it real.
Marissa Davis from London.
Another town I once called home. Bob
Hodges from Cheltenham.
Dr. Bob, everyone. And last but not least, the German.
Hey, I'm Malte Kiesling, and you already said I'm from Germany. What am I supposed to say now?
How about the town?
Oh,
yeah, whereabouts in Germany?
Yeah, Braunschweig is the place.
Is there a sausage from there?
Yes.
Bound to be.
Definitely. I think there is a sausage from every place in Germany.
Okay.
Right, so here to kick it off, I've decided to have a little quiz for you. Who do you think won? What nation won the most amount of launches this year? Was it China, Russia, or America?
Ooh.
I think it was America again this year. It was China.
I think it's the US, but I'd have no idea how many.
I was going to say China, but I'm usually wrong on these quizzes, so that's...
Starlink.
Yeah, Starlink definitely pushed the US into the lead. So, although China have probably got a couple more up their sleeve this year, it is US 44 and China 38.
Quite close.
Quite close. But how many of those American launches do you think were SpaceX Falcon 9?
30-something.
Yeah, 35.
Close. It was actually 25.
Okay.
But that does beat their own record and far outstrips everyone else. It's a very big year for SpaceX.
That's a launch every 2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a lot of launching.
And nothing got dropped on a village on the way past.
Which is why, of course, Elon Musk won our Space Personality of the Year and Falcon 9 won the Best Rocket of the Year, I suppose.
Do we have to drink now?
Yes, we do have to drink. Elon Musk, drink!
I don't think my glass is big enough for the amount of times we're going to mention.
Right, so does anyone remember what happened in January?
That was when we could still go down the pub.
Yeah, that seems extraordinary, doesn't it? Yeah, we just started to hear the news of COVID-19.
Mm.
I think the funniest story from January is Yasuka Mazawa and him having to row back from his reality TV program where he was going to take his latest date on a trip around the moon. And
yeah, that was painful.
It was a little bit creepy, wasn't it?
Is that mission still on the cards? With the artists and the trip around the moon, is that still?
Yeah, I believe it is. I haven't heard to the contrary.
I don't think he's gotten his money back.
No, I don't think he's going to get his money back either. February also saw the MEV Mission Extension Vehicle 1, which I thought was a really exciting mission. And what it did is it went out and it grabbed a big, massive satellite from a graveyard orbit and put it back into geostationary orbit to extend its life by another 5 years, which I think is a huge thing, this on-orbit servicing of satellites. I think that is a pretty major event, probably a little bit overlooked this year, but yeah, that was really, really cool. But also, there was a Falcon 9 booked to take Psyche on its mission. And to
Indeed.
tell us about Psyche, we've got Dr. Bob.
Well, it is. I've got a real soft spot for Psyche as a planetary body anyway. So it's a pretty big main sequence asteroid. It's probably at 1% of the mass of the whole of the asteroid belt itself, and it's by far the biggest metallic asteroid there is. So possibly also the source of the mesosiderite meteorites that we find on Earth, which are really rare. But this Falcon Heavy launch is going to fire this probe that's being built at JPL. It's an ion electric drive probe that will take 3.5 years to get there, having been launched in August 2022. And the thing for me here is this thing is going to be thrusting 80% of the time, and it's got these ion drives which apply the same thrust as the weight of 3 US quarter coins, which is quite and that's after it's had a gravity assist after flying back past Earth and past Mars as well. So it will get there, and it's going to spend 21 months looking at this amazing body, which is what we think that the extinct core of a failed protoplanet, which could have been in its up to between 500 kilometers diameter and up to the size of Mars, some people say. But what's left is the metallic core. So this thing originally was big enough for the heavy elements to settle to the middle and to differentiate. So it's an awful lot of iron and an awful lot of nickel at the very least. And it came back into the news in October because a Hubble study, which was reported by and led by Tracy Beaker from Tracy Becker. Sorry, Tracy Beaker. You can tell I've got kids. From Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio. So they put their study out there looking at the UV absorption wavelengths and spectrum of this body, and they conclude that it could be anywhere on the surface between pure iron and 10% iron, and then did a bit more conjecture, but basically came up and said more work is needed because there are no analogues. There is nothing else like this to calibrate their readings with. And of course then the press then went into overdrive, and I can't work out who actually first put this out there, but apparently the metal in this thing would then be worth $10,000 quadrillion, more than the entire economy of the Earth. So that's the clickbait. And it's just insane. How do you get there from there? Yeah. So that really quite amused me about how they were completely missing the point. This thing possibly holds the key to planetary formation and a greater knowledge of how solar systems evolve. But no, it's worth $10,000 quadrillion. Even if
I mean, well, I can't help feeling if you did find a way of dragging it back to Earth, you'd kind of ruin that economy, right? Of just
supply and demand. You've just completely dropped the bottom out of the market dry. Plus, if you cock your maths up, that's an extinction level event.
And some.
Someone ought to calculate the economic value of the black hole at the center of the galaxy and write a news article about it.
What is the economic value of Sagittarius A star? I don't know.
$1 million quadrillion.
Yeah.
Just in scariness, in the amount of horror movies you can make from it.
Well, they're talking about weights, in total mass for Psyche, with something times 10 to the 19 or 20. So I think it's to the 19, which is fairly large. But that's probably the times 10 to the 19 times 10 to the 19 for Sagittarius A.
Presumably, all they did was just get the market value of steel and multiply it by the mass of Psyche, which is simple. Terribly economically correct.
Well, some of them are even saying that NASA has just discovered. NASA discovers asteroid worth 10,000 quadrillion. This thing was discovered in 1852 by an Italian called Annibale de Gasparis. 16th minor planet discovered.
Yeah, I kind of want to have a podcast just purely about how the press report on space. Even the Elon Musk, which we'll get to. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the belly flop, but virtually all the sort of main press went with Elon Musk's rocket ends in fireball. Nobody was aboard. It's like,
yeah, completely missing the whole point.
It was fabulous. It was absolutely genius. Yeah, I'm super excited about Psyche as well. I think Psyche is one of the best missions that NASA's got on their kind of list of. In fact, what level mission is it? It's
Discovery class.
Discovery class. Yeah, I mean it's such a good mission because you're right. It will be one of those ones that tells us loads about planetary formation. So that's a super exciting one.
And so I'm just pleased to hear that 80% thrust doesn't require fuel tanks the size of the observable universe. I'm still cross about getting that question wrong last time we got to it.
Yeah, well, that's the good odd ion propulsion.
Ion propulsion for you, yeah. Fantastic.
A lot of bang for your buck, but not much thrust.
Well, the Dawn mission, a couple decades ago, had the thrust of a weight of paper. So a couple of quarters is a big increase.
Yeah,
this is effectively the follow-up to Dawn, which was the follow-up to Deep Space One. So this will be the third planetary probe with this propulsion system.
Maybe it was Deep Space One that was the piece of paper. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think Dawn's were super weedy in comparison, but they changed the solar panel design as well on the Psyche spacecraft, so they found a way of getting it there quicker by actually having more power to the ion drives.
Could be lighter weight as well.
There's a really good blog by the propulsion engineers on this and about the margins that they're building into this for safety as well. So
that's definitely one to follow. February was rubbish though for losing space legends. In February, we lost Katherine Johnson, the hidden figure from NASA. Heather Cooper, who was massive in this country, she was like a really big personality on the TV when it came to astronomy.
Yeah. Her pop-up Halley's Comet was one of the things that got me into space in the first place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I remember. She genuinely was like a proper fixture in. Yeah, when I was not actually sort of teenager. She was a proper fixture on TV.
Absolutely. Happy memories. We're all that generation, aren't we, to recall those TV appearances.
Freeman Dyson as well died in February as well. Pretty rubbish, huh? Yeah. SN1 was being rolled out in Boca Chica. So this was the start of seeing SN1 out there in Boca Chica. In fact, John, when did you go camping there?
Right after serial number 4 exploded.
That's right, yeah. So that's, what was that, April, May, June?
I think it was around May. It was hot and rainy.
Still, that's incredible to realise that they've gone from SN1 to 8 and what they've achieved in that timescale. I'd forgotten that was this year.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. At the time, Elon Musk was tweeting that SN3 or 4 were going to go orbital.
Okay, yeah. I'll take it back.
but Christina Koch as well. She set the world record for women 328 days in space, coming back on the 6th of February 2020.
And can I put my dibs in there because I reckon she's going to be the first woman on the moon as well. So I'm bagging her.
Yeah, it's a good call.
It's a very good call. That anyone think of anyone more likely?
Maybe Yusaku's girlfriend might be the first.
Oh
one.
Yeah, that's true. Let me out. Well, there's only one place we can let you out. Well, I don't mind. Right, March, SETI at home was switched off. And the Franklin rover is delayed because of COVID-19, and OneWeb also go into bankruptcy as a result of COVID-19 as well, and various other things. April, launch of MS-16 to the space station. So that's Anatoly Ivanishin, Ivan Wagner, and Christopher Cassidy. And they were the ones that sort of had to have their entire thing done under strict quarantine. So that was a pretty miserable, must have been a pretty miserable launch. Dragon 1 flew its final mission, and it was the return of the worm in April. And the Bepi Colombo flyby of Earth and Hubble's 30th birthday. So there's loads happening in April. May, Tom Cruise said he's going to space. China's Long March 5B launched with their Orion on board.
Tom Cruise going to space on Long March would be better, wouldn't it? That'd be more interesting.
Yeah, that would be.
That'd be.
I think
there'd be some mild peril there, maybe.
Oh, yeah. It's the birth of X-Ash A12 Musk as well in May. And SpaceX Dragon 2 makes its first crewed flight to the International Space Station. And Marissa, you're going to take this one for us.
Yes, yeah. I think this was probably the most exciting space event for me personally this year. I guess because for many different reasons. Obviously, I watched a lot of the coverage like everyone did. I think there was millions around the world watching, really. The idea that NASA was working with SpaceX, so the fact that a government agency was working with a private company for the first time and the launch was a success, I think was a really big step forward for everyone. And obviously because as well, it was the first time that NASA didn't rely on the Russian Soyuz to get astronauts to the ISS. A really big milestone. So
it's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely huge. There's a couple of things in there, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned the Soyuz, which of course is just an R7 rocket from the mid 60s, or maybe even earlier, and it's still being used. And SpaceX Crew Dragon is and Falcon 9 is only the 10th crewed orbital vehicle ever made.
Yes.
It's just incredible, really, that we've had 60 years of orbital space launch, and it's taken that long to get the 10th one. But it's the first commercial one, which is the big one, isn't it? Really, and of course it's that man Elon Musk and SpaceX again.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was reviewing Twitter myself the other day and realised that I'd done the cliched "I'm not crying, you're crying" tweet at that launch. You know, and I'm normally the sort of SpaceX miserablest, not banging on about challenges and problems. But yeah, that was amazing.
That launch was actually why I felt like going to Boca Chica. Was I thought, what a cool place to watch it, and so that's when serial number 4 exploded. And when I came back from the camping trip, I watched it on a tablet. You know, right after leaving the SpaceX facilities.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Location.
Yeah. But I think also too, just obviously I was able to share the event with my family and friends back home in Australia. Obviously they're about 8 hours ahead of me at the time. But seeing close friends and family watching the event live and their young children watching it live. And I think it just sort of inspires a new generation, which I think is really important at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I think it will be a sort of touchstone moment. Bob, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I wouldn't get too down on Soyuz, considering that the Centaur upper stage is almost as old. And that's been putting American stuff into for decades as well, and now humans with the Starliner.
A good point.
There's nothing wrong, I don't suppose, really, with old stuff if it works, right?
Oh, yeah. It's the Breeze M, so I love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's everyone's favourite space tug, Bob. You can't be into space and not love your Soyuz. It's quite funny watching any tweet now by Rogozin if he mentions SpaceX. They seem utterly childish every single time. It's just like it's almost embarrassing, almost Trump-like.
Yes.
No offense, John.
Oh, please! I'm offended that you think I would be offended.
Yeah, Dimitri needs to put his big boy pants on too, I think, not just Donald.
Yeah. Crikey. June, NASA approved the reuse of boosters. So they're so chuffed with SpaceX. They say, yep, it's fine for you to stick humans on top of reused boosters, which I didn't actually think would ever happen, but that's a thing. Yep. Loads more Starlinks. Vega returned to flight, which will have some bad news at the end of it. China completes their Beidou GPS type system. And UK and the US sign a technology agreement paving the way for the US to launch from UK soil. But this brings us to Rob and Sutherland Spaceport.
Yeah. So this was a really interesting story for me. I thought I'd leave you guys to talk about ion drives and Crew Dragon, and it seemed incumbent on me as the architect to mention the shed being put up in the Highlands, hopefully later this year. So planning approval for the Sutherland Spaceport which is apparently due for construction during next year. And the current proposal, I understand it, is that there's going to be the first 3 launches targeted for the end of 2022. Seems like a pretty crazy timescale. But huge news that I was really engaged with and interested in, just on many levels, that here in the UK we could get to be taking part in the space sector, that there'll be opportunities for enthusiasts like ourselves to maybe go and see a launch. Seemed like a pretty big deal as well. Lots of controversy around it though as well. And looking at it again over the last couple of days, there's lots of discussion going on still about the future of that proposal. And there's a competing proposal now for location in the Shetland Islands. And it's going to be up for judicial review, I've just seen. There's been an application made to call in that application for judicial review to look again at the planning approval. So, worrying times maybe for some of the people involved in that, and it could drag on a little while. But the key thing about that as well is that it's a really important aspect of Orbex's proposal, which I think are a rocket company that we were all impressed with in your previous interviews, Matt, with that company. So, from a rocket point of view, their work with the biofuel, the propane, and 3D printing is really interesting. And it seems like the controversy around the spaceport is mostly about environmental issues. So there's a paradox here about how the primary company proposing to use that launch pad really working hard, it seems, to improve their environmental performance, but there's still some question over the environmental impacts of a spaceport.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing of looking over that proposal, was just how much effort they'd gone into making the spaceport almost invisible in the surrounding environment.
They have visually. You recall we talked about it at the time, but I'm a little underwhelmed by the proposals. But I have to say, having looked at the Shetland ones today, I'm even more underwhelmed by those. They are literally just tin sheds on this island in Shetland. So from a strictly architectural point of view, more effort could be made. I'll be honest. C minus.
Yeah.
The southern proposal does seek to make a much reduced visual impact. But I think what's interesting about these proposals when you look at them is it's worth keeping in mind, for me, the scale of these buildings and the impact as well. We call them a spaceport, but it's not like we're proposing some new rebel base on Tatooine. This is 2 buildings in a concrete pad. These are actually pretty small interventions in the landscape. And I was surprised to see the scale of the launch building and the scale of the building by the pad. It's small interventions on the landscape, it seems to me. But of course, it goes beyond that to questions about exclusion zones, about what happens to debris and rocket fairings after launch.
The environmental impact of it is a bit moot, really, because just up the coast, there's a small rocky island just offshore. The RAF lob 1,000-pound aerial bombs at hundreds of times a year, and they have been doing for the last 60 years. Yeah. And the explosions and the the absolute noise from that is incredible.
There's arguments about the exclusion zone. I can see that there's some debate over the size of the exclusion zone. I've seen some interesting comments about the amount of debris that would fall into the sea. There's supposed to be 12 launches going from this thing. Only 12 now because it's only Orbex now. And that's part of the controversy that Lockheed Martin, who were going to be involved to begin with, have now backed away from it and are backing the other spaceport proposal in Shetland. And I've seen comments about how on these 12 launches, there's going to be potentially 5 tons of material dropped into the sea for every launch. So this stuff is still complex and still under discussion. So it's concerning because some of this progress might be hindered going forward. And there's lots of controversy you'll see online as well about the people involved in the judicial review. It's being headed up by one of the backers of the other spaceport. So lots of controversy and debate going to go on around this. So I wonder, Matt, if there's another return, an interview with Orbex to be had.
Yeah, no, there certainly is. There certainly is. I'd also quite like to get the German ones because there's a little bit of me that's thinking if there is going to be one competitor in Europe, because after listening to Eric Berger, you kind of have to agree with him that there's only really space for one more small sat launcher, really, if that, and he seemed to be suggesting that it was highly likely to be these new, very competitive German companies that have succeeded in getting loads more money than Orbex have managed to get as well. So it'd be really interesting. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to speak to Orbex again. You know, Orbex were deeply worried about the sort of very organized environmental movement against them. I do know that. You know, they were concerned about it, and you know, but it's we'll see, won't we? I mean, I guess it's one of those things that, yeah, it just might be yet another missed opportunity down to something that may be right or may be wrong. You know, it's really hard one to call, isn't it? Because you want environmental protection, but you also want an economy.
Absolutely. It doesn't seem clear in the press and the discussions at the minute about whether or not there's anybody clearly stating it's one or the other. Both parties seem to be progressing on the idea that they can just do their own thing. I think maybe the danger here is that, you know, that the German competition you mentioned might actually undo them both. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
while they're busy arguing.
Yeah, and I seem to remember Orbex aren't completely married to Scotland either. They can move. I think it was to Norway or somewhere, you know, even further north.
Like Kiruna.
They are updating the Esrange Space Center in Sweden for orbital capability as well now. I think it was announced in October or something. Though I have been wondering there as well, because originally all the suborbital launches from Esrange dropped their stuff like still in Sweden. But if they are now going over Norway, I don't know how that will work out.
I think that it's not just, you know, will it happen or won't it happen or should it happen or shouldn't happen, but what is the right way to do it? You know, if you're going to drop a ton of hydrazine on a fish farm, that's different from dropping a ton of aluminum, you know, on like a ship graveyard or something like that, right?
And that's Orbex's point, I think, with the work they're trying to do with their fuel. One worry out of this is that there was a point early in the year when I think, you know, as Spodcats, there was discussion about seeing a launch. Now, if it goes to the Shetland Islands, it's going to be a lot further away. We can't rock up and get out the deck chairs just so easily.
Yeah.
So on a personal level, that's a real shame, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I know you said, Rob, that, I mean, it's not UK spaceport possibly isn't huge news, I guess, in the world scheme of the space industry, but I know personally that it was one of the big drivers in my decision to actually change my career. So and actually go back to study to try and work in the space industry, because I think it'll be really, really good for the UK.
Yeah. Also, just as a layman, the other thing that news brought to me was that I knew nothing about sun-synchronous or polar orbits until I saw that news article. My crude understanding of launches and orbits were always that you need to be on the equator. So that was really interesting. You know, as a layman trying to learn more about the sector, it was interesting to learn about those things that you can launch from that part of the globe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hard bit from Scotland is the fact, obviously, you've got to go over incredibly expensive oil fields. The last thing you want to do is dump a big piece of aluminium on top of an oil field, but also the second stage, there's a risk of it landing on Russian territory as well.
All right. I think that's the point the Shetland team are trying to make.
Yeah.
That their flight path is clearer.
Yeah, and it is. There's a dogleg maneuver that you have to do from Scotland. Yeah. Always.
They cite that the Shetland team cite that in their objections to the Sutherland one.
Yeah. It'd be it's definitely going to be very interesting how it pans out, and I think that there's an element of Brexit that plays into this as well, with the fact that the UK clearly want to maintain their kind of place as a space country, not just maintain it, but sort of expand it. So there's an element of that, but of course that doesn't affect whether it's Sutherland or Shetland, I suppose.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go.
Spaceports. It's a big one. It's a big one. Where are we? We're in July. So talking about the UK, yes, we UK took a stake in OneWeb. So half of us here are owners of a nice space constellation. That's very nice. Comet Neowise. I'm going to say this was my favourite event of the year, was Comet Neowise. Going out and seeing the comet was literally one of my favourite moments ever actually. Like going, oh my God, that's actually it, was absolutely incredible. Thomas Pesquet got his seat on Crew 2 for Mission Alpha. But the big three were the Mars missions all setting off at the end of July. We had Hope by the United Arab Emirates on a Japanese H-2A. Had the Chinese Tianwen 1 mission to Mars on a Long March 5, and the Perseverance and Ingenuity helicopter on their way to Mars on an Atlas 5, lofted by that ancient old upper stage. August is a horrible one, is two horrible ones. Jamie's 200th episode, the last of the Spodcat episodes, which was great, and but Arecibo got its first cable snap in August, and no one saw it as being collapsed by the end of the year at that point, did they? But it took another cable to snap later on for them to see that.
It's a beautiful analogy for 2020, isn't it? Nobody saw it collapsing.
No, yeah. Yeah, I suppose that is the cable snapping is, apparently they've got a virus out in China. And
it survived the filming of GoldenEye.
Yeah, it survived Piers Brosnan swinging about on it.
Is that connected to the SETI at Home closure earlier? Didn't Arecibo provide much of the data for the SETI at Home project, or have I got that completely wrong?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. I mean, there's loads of...
So SETI at Home closed, and then the dish gave up the ghost.
Ooh. You're not trying to bung a conspiracy theory in there, are you?
Not at all.
Talking of conspiracy theories, September is a competition between Venus and Mars. We have Life in the Clouds of Venus with phosphine, and then about a week later, Mars comes back with bigger and deeper lakes than we first thought, and just under the surface. So that was pretty cool. October, however, is the moon having a go. So, John, tell us a bit about the moon.
Yeah. So the paper came out in October titled Molecular Water Detected on the Sunlit Moon by Sophia. So NASA and the German Space Agency had a joint project where they modified a 747 to have a big telescope in it. And the German Space Agency was responsible for the telescope itself, as well as many of the instruments. The mirror was made in Germany. It was ground in France. The mirror housing was made in Switzerland. It was coated in Louisiana, and now it gets its recoating in California. So it's a big international project. And they fly this telescope above most of the atmosphere so that they can measure infrared wavelengths, which otherwise get blocked by the atmosphere, like water, right? So our atmosphere has a bunch of water in it. And so if you want to see water on the surface of the moon and you're on the ground, you might just be seeing water in the atmosphere of Earth because there's a bunch of water between, the ground and the moon. So they flew this telescope up there, and they actually used this instrument by Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, called the Faint Object Infrared Camera. So it's just something that kind of bolts on and uses this international telescope. And they discovered a signature electromagnetic spectrum emission. When hydrogen and oxygen are connected to each other, they absorb photons and emit photons at very specific wavelengths. So if anyone's ever looked through a spectrograph and you see those little kind of lines in the rainbow, that's what's happening. And so that bond between oxygen and hydrogen, there's this 3 micrometer emission, which can be between many different types of oxygen and hydrogen bonds. But then there's a 6 micrometer emission, which is really just a water emission. And so that was the news, is that they found this 6 micrometer emission on the surface of the moon. And they said in the paper, we find that this distribution of water over the small latitude range is a result of local geology and is probably not a global phenomenon. So that's what the paper said, which is a little different from the first sentence of NASA's press release, which says, NASA Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy has confirmed for the first time water on the sun's surface of the moon. This discovery indicates that water may be distributed across the lunar surface. and not limited to cold shadow places. So slightly different emphasis there. It's everywhere versus it's just here. They said, we suggest that a majority of the water we detect must be stored within glasses or in voids between the grains sheltered from the harsh lunar environment. So this isn't like puddles of water. This is, in the rock. There's this Bible story of Moses striking the rock and water comes out. It's kind of that type of miracle level event to get this water out. But it's there. And so I think this is significant because, for a long time, like Apollo, for example, you had to bring everything with you. And, I'm happy to see NASA embracing this kind of live off the land, in situ resource utilization philosophy, not just as, a neat trick, but as actually something that they base their missions off of. So right now, because NASA wants to live off the land, they're really interested in going to the South Pole or the poles, because there's permanently shadowed regions there that never see the sunlight, that are always cold, and so the water can stay there for a while. And that's great because they can have sustained operations, they can make rocket fuel and drinking water, and feed their plants. But it's bad because it's hard to get to the poles of the moon. But now that they're discovering water at lower latitudes, then more transportation systems can get there. And, a transportation system that can get to the pole of the moon can put more mass at a lower latitude, such as the mass required to, crack rocks open and get water out of them, right? That's going to be heavy. So what else they said? Some interesting stats in the press release, roughly equivalent to a 12-ounce bottle of water trapped in a cubic meter of soil. So
yeah, but that seems significant. I was expecting something like a thimbleful of water per mountain or something. Kind of.
I guess it's all relative and subjective.
Yeah, I like that. I like that analysis of it's so much harder to get to the polar regions that you could then have more mass that could crack open rocks. I really like that. In fact, I don't think I've ever understood the story as well as you've just told it there, in terms of that's kind of what it means. Because it's like, well, surely you just still go to the poles because that's where the water's actually almost essentially ready to get at.
Yeah, well, and that's been one of the criticisms of SLS Orion and the Lunar Gateway, is that a lot of these locations and capabilities have to do with these ground rules that the base shall be on the pole. Well, if it shall be on the pole, then, what is the orbit of the gateway and how much delta V, how much delta V can SLS put into Orion to get it to a location where the astronauts could eventually get to the pole. So it's kind of a tortured path to get to the pole, and we can do it. But, when you look at NASA's architecture of having a transportation stage, like Blue Origin's national team, you've got a transportation stage, you've got the ascent module, and you've got the lander. And the existence of all of those pieces and the capabilities that all those pieces have to do is very much driven by where the pole is and where the gateway is, right? And so now that we're saying, well, maybe there's actually water around, not necessarily the equator, but other places, then it allows you to do more things with less hardware.
Yeah, have you got any thoughts about the outgoing administration and what that means really for the whole architecture of Artemis, for example?
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily have anything new to add to the conversation, but I subscribe to what's been reported, which is that the Biden administration is saying we don't want to rock the boat on a lot of at least the commercial policies, which they started before Trump arrived. Biden's, it looks like he's going to be more focused on earth science. But what I'm hopeful for, and I think is possible, is that maybe instead of a moon landing at the end of Trump's second term, there will be a moon landing at the end of Biden's second term, which, is kind of the same thing, except 4 years later.
But he's looking fragile now. add 8 years onto Biden's age, and he's going to be an old president, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he might not embrace that that concern, but
hasn't he? He's broken his foot or something, hasn't he? Recently.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that I hope that more money goes to Artemis and less money goes to SLS, in a large degree influenced by what happens in Congress and not the administration. So we'll see. There's big forces at work beyond just the presidency. One thing has been established, and that is that NASA gets paid more and more money each year, for good or bad. And it's just a question of where that money goes.
To be fair, I quite like the way that NASA spends the money, but it's not my money, so I don't.
Yeah, they do a lot of good. They do a lot of good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there really no chance of Jim Bridenstine staying on?
He so what's interesting is he's a politician, and a lot of people criticized that when he came in. So, oh no, we need, administrator types, science types. And so I see it out of character of Jim to, abandon kind of his political identity as a conservative Trump supporter to, kind of big-mindedly embrace the bipartisanship of, working for two administrators. So I'm a fan of Bridenstine. I think he's done good things, but I believe him when he says no.
Yeah, I think it's definitely over, isn't it, for Bridenstine? I mean, it was over apparently anyway, but...
Well, I mean, you look at Dr. Fauci, who, was working for Trump, and he's accepted a role under Bridenstine. So it's not to say that type of thing can't happen, but Fauci was a scientist. Bridenstine is not. He is a politician, and that's part of what makes him good is his competency at getting support from, for example, Republican lawmakers.
American politics definitely confuses me, but you can you can definitely see that Congress and all those kind of things and the way that everything lines up and everyone has to make each state happy with the outcome. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's just a very difficult. But I mean, I suppose it's equally complicated when you look at something like ESA and keeping all the member countries of ESA happy is difficult. But.
Well, and more on that with the states, the more that Artemis the more Artemis that's done in Alabama, the more survivable the Artemis program is. So Blue Origin set up an engine shop in Alabama. Of course, Boeing has a lot of operations in Alabama, and that's because Senator Shelby is in charge of appropriations and. So, that's kind of independent of the presidency, but has a big impact, I think, on the future of Artemis. Dianetics, of course, is in Alabama. They're one of the Artemis teams. So that's the place to be if you want political clout for Artemis.
Wow. Yeah. And Elon Musk's moving to Texas, is that right?
Yep. Yeah, we'll be neighbors.
Excellent. Right, so November is the month that Vega fails. SpaceX do Crew 1 Resilience, so that is the first proper mission to the International Space Station, and China launch one of the best missions of the year, the Chang'e 5 on the 23rd of November, which I didn't realise that the orbiter has got an extension of its mission, and it's now sort of going off to the Sun-Earth Lagrange point L1, which I didn't know. Drink to the Lagrange point. Certainly. So Malta, you're up. It is the Starship. Which was just so incredibly exciting. So someone has to talk about it.
Before I can start about the actual flight of SN8, we have to point out that SN8 has been quite an interesting prototype from the start. So they of course all the prototypes they had, they did like a static fire of the engines up front, and as is tradition with things from SpaceX, something went wrong, and they I don't know exactly what it was, but they had a significant issue with one of the engines, and everything got delayed again. And then they had this big event set up, and people all over the world were watching. And they scrapped the first attempt at the flight.
Minus 1 second, wasn't it?
2 seconds or something. I think Elon Musk, drink, tweeted that they had a Raptor bot, I think they called it, where just engine issues, I suppose. Then the second attempt, that was on the 9th of December, was also aborted 2 minutes before flight. I think we believed it was a range violation when we were like sitting in the Discord and typing, but I don't actually remember what it was. And I didn't find out anything about it.
No.
Because I think everyone just focused on the third attempt, like 2 hours later, that actually flew. Yeah, they launched the thing. It got off the ground pretty well. And about a minute or so into flight, one of the engines turned off. As later turned out, that was intentional. A little later into the flight, they turned off a second engine. And then the thing seemed to hover a bit. It was probably still going up, just really slowly. And then they did the next thing, which I think no one has ever done before with something that's supposed to go to space. They just flopped it over and started flying it like a plane, just to later try to attempt it again to land it like they land like their Falcon 9. And to do that, this tilting over they call the belly flop. And then this starship with its tiny wings on the side becomes like an airplane. And then it goes up again by I think they both fire the engines to help push it around, and they tilt the control surfaces. And then they tried to land, and of course, not everything. It was the first attempt. Everyone was surprised they got that far, but essentially, what happened is that one of the tanks they added inside, like these, I think they called them header tanks, so small extra tanks just for the landing, did not have enough pressure, and the engines did not get enough fuel. So this thing crashed. The exhaust got a little green from that. Turns out that the engine actually started to combust itself towards the end. Also known as engine-rich exhaust, what gets out at the end of the thing. And yeah, that was it. Super exciting. Nice big explosion in the end that no one was sad about, which is nice. And a lot of media bullshit, to be absolutely honest.
Yeah, they got it completely wrong.
No news is bad news.
Yeah, it's what I thought was great about that entire experience watching it was that it was completely different to how every single render, every single description of what it was going to be like was like. Because it was nothing like all the sort of renders and things, the sort of 3D animations, etc.
And then it was such new territory as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just how slow it went up. It was like it's just like barely getting off, just looking like it could barely get off the launch pad, and how violent. Yeah, like when that first engine getting switched off, how violent the way that the things can move to compensate for that change of thrust and how quick it can move. Looks like it had gone wrong, but no, it's actually how much it can gimbal at the speed and everything. It was incredible, I thought.
And the level of innovation there was huge, wasn't it? The when that first engine switched off, most of us were like, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's
broke. It was great fun on the Discord channel for us all to be chatting about it and share that experience. But also, just the dawning realization that they got it, that was all planned all along.
Yeah.
When you thought about it for a moment, was fantastic. Just the level of innovation foxed us all.
I can imagine the public relations people of SpaceX that did not tell us that this was going to happen, just sitting behind their desk and laughing manically.
Yeah,
they were loving it. Yeah.
So there was this shot of the smoldering wreckage on the pad, And after a little bit, they put in a little caption that said, "Great job."
Oh man, the footage of Elon Musk the next day or the next couple of days later wandering through the wreckage, I think says it all, doesn't it? That the fact, I don't think it's hard to see anyone looking as happy and as smug as Musk was looking right then.
Yeah, it's so James Bond supervillain, isn't it? It's
yeah.
Perfect for.
I watched Tim Dodd's The Everyday Astronauts feed of it, and he, quite frankly, he lost his shit. He went, he completely lost it, didn't he?
I'm equally. I missed the successful launch, but I watched it for the first one that shut down with a second to go, and I've never seen anybody more crestfallen. That one closed down.
What is important for me about this is actually Starship is interesting and everything, but I'm like in this local rocket club here in the city, and all over the year we have not been seeing each other, and we are still trying to work on our projects. We even had one of the student teams in the club had a launch in Sweden with an experimental rocket, but we were all kind of lacking the together thing that we had usually. Like, if you're in a big team with a lot of people, it's kind of hard to keep everyone on the same wavelength. And over the year, it got harder to work with each other in some places. And what we were really lacking was the excitement. So Demo 2 and Crew 1 and the Starship hops really saved us a little there. And that's why these events are so important to me, because it helps keep us together and make just watching this together is so much excitement, so much speculation beforehand.
And for all my grumbling about SpaceX, it's clear that they get that, don't they? They get the value of those moments for morale and enthusiasm.
It's the most obvious difference, isn't it, between NASA's SLS and SpaceX's Starship? Is one is literally he's building it right in front of us and letting us enjoy the success and the failures as we go along, and the NASA one is just slowly catchy monkey. It'll be ready when it's ready, and it's like it's a lot less. It's nowhere near as exciting, that's for certain.
And also Blue Origin.
Yeah, and Blue Origin are even worse than NASA.
I was thinking about that when you did that interview about the recovery of the Apollo rockets, the level of secrecy that had gone on there. I mean, maybe it's a different topic because of the sensitivities around that, but Jeff Bezos's desire to keep it all on the low.
Well, it's going to. Let's face it. We're all going to be insanely excited when New Glenn rolls out to the launch pad for the first time, and that might be 2021.
Is that when it's set? I can't recall.
Yeah, I think so. So, that'll be huge if New Glenn rolls out and we watch a New Glenn booster landing. It's going to look absolutely incredible, and that
What's the payload on New Glenn?
It's
capacity?
huge, isn't it? Someone help me out here. It's got a huge fairing as well. That's the big advantage of it, isn't it? It's
payload to Leo, 45 tons.
That is.
Oh, see, as the habitat guy around here, the fairing size is interesting, because when you look across the history of accommodation and habitat and design, it's all fairing driven. It's all largely 4-meter diameter tubes.
Yeah.
So when fairing design changes and increases, then those habitation opportunities and inflatable technology starts to really get interesting.
Yeah, and it says here expected to launch 2021. So that could be the big one, the big one for next year, along with lots of other Starship shenanigans. And I should imagine that obviously the big booster that goes with Starship as well.
Super heavy.
The Super Heavy, yeah.
So New Glenn from Shetland. Big year.
Yeah.
Big year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need something more than a shed, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, we'll be getting back to normal. Well, that pretty much sums up the year. Other than we haven't really done December. The Hayabusa mission return and the Chang'e mission return of samples back to Earth as well. I mean, what a great...
They're the missions of the year. Hayabusa 2 is the mission of the year for me.
Yeah, it's a fantastic mission. And it turns out that it's absolutely brimming with samples as well. It's like... it's all over the side of the canister as well as inside it as well. So that's looking really, really good. So, Hayabusa, that's absolutely incredible. Did we mention Osiris Rex landing on Bennu as well? So that will be coming back with samples. I don't know, presumably at the end of 21, I think. So yeah, it has been an epic year for space, considering. And to be fair, it's been a brilliant year. It's been a brilliant end to the year as well, I think.
Yeah,
and this has been a brilliant end to the year, having the Spodcats on for a good God. We've managed to we've done it for an hour, which is pretty goddamn good, I reckon. Well, thanks very much. Does anyone? Let's go do a quick round robin of what you're looking forward to next year. John,
Starship.
It's going to be Starship 21. Rob.
Yeah.
I'm clearly going to be lost in planning battles about UK spaceports next year.
Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Marissa?
Probably a bit of both Starship and UK spaceports, I think, are the most exciting things for me.
Bob?
Fingers crossed for Starliner, bit of ULA, a bit more Centaur, bit of Bronson for Atlas, you never know.
Oh, will Starliner actually carry crew next year? Or is that being put back to 22? It's something ridiculous, isn't it?
I think it's a close one thing. I'd be pleasantly surprised if crew went up next year, but I think they'll definitely do a demo.
Yeah, Malta.
Well, Starship still is the obvious answer, but ESA is apparently also planning. So it's probably not going to happen, but they are planning to test new technologies, and I think reusable rockets are among these things.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong here, but is the big launch really not going to be the Space Telescope?
Oh my God, is that next year? I forgot about that.
Are you actually believing that it will happen, though?
I think the big news is that one is looking very, very likely. Yeah, the James Webb is looking likely to stay on target.
It'll be absolutely terrifying.
The James Webb is coming up. Really, because it has been delayed so often, it's not really been in the forefront of my mind anymore.
31st of October, 2021, less than a year away.
A lot can change.
Is it going to be back like the 250th episode? It might be round about there, So, could be good timing. Good timing.
We could all hide behind the sofa together while we watch it launch. Then
you got to go down there again.
We need to get Julio to get us all out to Karoo.
Yeah. I'll take my canoe. I'll meet you there.
You better start paddling now, aren't you?
Yeah, but the crazy thing for you, John, I think, because Eric came out and he had to fly to Paris to fly there. Like, even though it's it's not that far away. Well, I'm presuming it's a few thousand miles away, but you have to go a very long journey to get there. It's quite arduous. But yeah, maybe canoe's quicker, actually. You might be right.
There's also Bolton.
I don't like going to the airports these days,
Yeah, avoid airports, definitely. I'm gonna have a big hero out for Bob, who's out there vaccinating people as we speak. Man,
I was just going to say that's the big news for 2021. Bob's going to vaccinate everybody.
Yeah.
So big up to healthcare professionals everywhere for 2021.
Yeah, Bob, you are an absolute legend.
Hopefully, in the UK, we'll be pretty much done by early summer. Fingers crossed.
Incredible.
We're going to smash it.
Amazing news.
Your optimism is always welcome, Bob. Fair play to you.
I've got to be optimistic. It's just if they give us the vaccine, we'll finish the job. And so far, vaccine supplies are holding up nicely. And I'm very optimistic. I've had it myself. I had a slightly sore arm, and I woke up the next day feeling like I'd just worked a 70-hour week, and then I remembered I had. So
very good.
Awesome. Oh, yes. Well, I think we should finish on that note. Thank you very much to the Spodcats for joining me for episode 217, the final one of the year.
Hey,
Elon.
To Elon.
Cheers.
You're listening to the Interplanetary podcast, putting the ace back into space.
Mr.
Yes.
Chris Carney, as
Hello.
the latest co-host of the Interplanetary podcast, it is your turn to tell me, what was your space story of the year?
My space story of the year is a fairly new one, actually, and it is by the company Made in Space, who have made their first ceramic turbine part in orbit on another 3D printing milestone. And I'm really excited about that, and mainly excited about it, not just because we can now make things in space, which is going to actually cause a bit of a revolution in terms of construction in off Earth. Also, it makes me a little bit angry because we still haven't sorted out 2D printing here. Like, if I know anyone who can get a printer to work properly, then, that's great. But, before we move on, can we please just sort that one out? But yeah, there you go. That's mine. Hope you like it.
Do you know what? I feel exactly the same. Whenever I go to use my printer, it never works. And George's school, he's doing A-level DT, which is, design technology. And of course, the school can't get their 3D printer to work at all. So, yeah, to get a 3D printer working in space is quite an achievement, isn't it?
I think the reason why it's not working is because it's not in space.
Maybe that's
There
it.
you
Maybe doing this stuff in space is easier than in a modern high school.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they've got more money or something, but it could be to do with microgravity.
So tell us a little bit about, because do you know what? I have completely missed this story. So yeah, tell us a bit about this Made in Space.
Well, it's only reported 6 days ago from space.com, so you can check it out on there if you want to find the actual story. But the Florida-based company Made in Space, which I think is just a great name for a company anyway, have decided that they want to push things forward. And so Made in Space President Tom Campbell said, "This is an exciting milestone for space-enabled manufacturing and signals the potential for new markets that could spur commercial activity in low Earth orbit." And it just really excites me, to be honest, because, obviously one of the biggest challenges when we're getting something up into space is weight. If you could save that weight by saying, you know what, don't worry about it, we'll make it when we get there. I just think that's such an awesome thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know Made in Space have done some pretty awesome things before, like they've made fiber optic cable, haven't they? That's their big one. Yeah, which is part of the plot of the book that came out after The Martian, Artemis. Is it Artemis? Yeah. Yes, which is based around Z-Blan, a fiber optic cable, and the manufacturing of it. And I believe Made in Space do that. And yes, it's so making it the first commercial object that's been made in space, and the only place you can make it. So this is a ceramic engine part.
It is a ceramic engine part. It's actually specifically the part of a turbine. Yeah, so it's a ceramic turbine part, and that's also obviously the material is created a kind of a hoo-ha because it is a bit of a milestone. It will come down to Earth, which is quite funny. They just done it to say that they can. I think it's going to come back down on a dragon. But yeah, still pretty cool. But saying commercial, NASA last year awarded Made in Space $73.7 million. So they're definitely getting a little bit of a brown envelope there, let's say.
Yeah, do you know what? I've always thought if you there's money out there. Do you know what? In all seriousness, there for any sort of like entrepreneur, there is loads of money out there. Seed money from the UK Space Agency to ESA to NASA to loads of different places that want to give you money to come up with really, really good ideas. In fact, our mutual friend is part of the European Space Agency people that decide who gets funding.
Yeah, so that's part of the things he does. He's like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll give it my vote and get a little bit of cash. If
you've got a decent proposal, you can get it off the ground. You don't need to put your own money in. You can, if it's a good enough proposal, you can get it off the ground. And that's how all these companies start. Made in Space, SpaceX. SpaceX, that is money that that NASA gave to them. Like for things like the Dragon initially was, NASA said, right, build us a cargo vessel that can go to the ISS, and here's a load of money to develop it. And that really is how SpaceX got their money and leveraged it up.
That kind of reminds me that, we need to get working on the space podcast from low Earth orbit idea, because I think, if we get a good proposal in for that, we could be broadcasting from the ISS.
After listening about space elevators, I feel like putting a proposal to build a space elevator. Space elevator research. It's got to be. I mean, that's the way forward, surely.
Definitely. I agree. And if we're 3D printing the parts for the elevator as well, then it's even a double whammy.
Oh, yes. Just a normal space elevator that goes up to an enormous 3D printer in space.
Could we eventually do 3D terraforming?
Oh, well, I mean, see, the 3D printer eventually becomes the replicator. And once you have the replicator, then the economy no longer exists and people can work just for the love of the job.
But I never realised how much my space story of the year actually was linked to, the paradise, the prospect of a better world.
Prospect for utopia, yeah. Well, it's one little step forward, isn't it? It's one little step towards that utopia.
But a giant leap for utopian man.
And it's very important that people write novels about how that can all go wrong, so that we can avoid those pitfalls.
Definitely.
So
definitely.
that's part of the journey as well. So get writing, you creative types. That's what I say.
Actually, you know what? If I was going to choose something a little bit more close to home, my actual highlight of this year has been hearing you and Jamie interviewing Professor Brian Cox on last week's show, because he was fantastic. It was just amazing. So I just wanted to add that in here, like, well done to you guys, because he's one of my heroes, and just hearing him go so in depth with all those things was fun. I listened to it twice. So I had to listen to it again to just take it all in. It was an amazing dude.
What an amazing person. Do you know what? We've had some great interviews this year. And actually, I think that was definitely one of my favourites, but there's been some great ones like Jim Al-Khalili, Catherine Sullivan.
Yeah.
That's like just brilliant. I really like Concannon as well, and his dive down to get the F1 engines and all that.
That was one of my biggies, actually, just before I came on board. That interview. So I think it was a couple of weeks before I came on board, and I just loved it. I loved the fact that Bezos, is doing it to literally to inspire the young people to get interested in space. It's just a brilliant thing.
Yeah, it's the best thing about doing the podcast. The people that we interview, so many great people out there doing really, really, really fascinating stuff.
For reals.
For real.
Give my love to the Spodcat on the call later.
Happy New Year, old bean. I'll see you on the other side.
See you on the other side.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.